Great, we're here with Matthias, Schuler and Tetsuo Kondo, and we're going to mostly talk about your collaboration here for the Venice Architecture Biennale. But before that, I had a few questions about your individual practice, and I just want to ask you how it all started. What was your epiphany or your revelation? How did your work start? How did you come into architecture and into the work you're doing now?
Me? Should I? Come on, you start.
Like this.
Okay, so maybe I'm the older one.
Yeah.
So we started the company 18 years ago, Transsolar. We are an engineering company, and the intention was that we find out, I worked 5 years in research, that the best building in respect of sustainable buildings are the buildings which are from the first moment in a team approached with the background of sustainability. But a lot of architects didn't have the background on doing so. So there was a lack in respect of information and support in real practice. So we said, okay, we know it now from research, why are we not starting an office? And we were lucky enough to find more and more architects who were very interested in this support. So we are supporting architects from the first moment, often even in the competition, in the first idea collection, what a certain location in a certain way would be supported in their background in respect of architecture. So saying, for example, you identify whatever, let's say you are in Abu Dhabi and there is a bright sun and you should be in the shadow and you should filter the light. These discussions with Jean Nouvel led to the design of the Louvre Abu Dhabi, which is the light filtering through a big dome. So in a certain way, this very close collaboration, which then finally we nowadays quite successfully serving, would say, the first league of the architects with this service.
But it's interesting because I read in the German press like interviews with you from the 90s and now interviews now, and I mean things changed over the last 10, 15 years quite considerably, because this whole idea of energy technology is now such a constituent part in terms of sustainability and the 21st century that it's very much part from the beginning of a conversation with an architect about the building. I mean, it's almost as important as the collaboration of the architect with the engineer somehow. But that wasn't always the case, I suppose. When you started, it was a more marginal activity.
It was, I think when we started, it was very local in Germany. In Germany, it was already at that time a theme, and there had been as well activities by big engineering offices like Arup, having this in mind. So in a certain way, there were examples, but it was more known, I would say, more known in research than in real practice. And often, I would say, famous architects were not connected to sustainable buildings, and I think in a certain way, that's in a certain way en vogue. Even Frank Gehry talk about the green part of his building nowadays. So in a certain way, it spread quite far, and in a certain way, I see it as a kind of success, because our kind of secret strategy is we want to infiltrate, I call it infiltrate, as much as possible architects from the well-known level to show, because green buildings have been in the eco corner, they had been connected to wool and wood and ugly boxes, and I think we should show that sustainable buildings can be first-level architecture. That's the intention.
But it's also interesting because you said that when we met in Copenhagen, where we met last at the World Climate Summit, you said that it's very often the climate, basically the energy technology arrives too late in the process, and how important it is to be there from the beginning. It's almost like, for me, from a curatorial point of view with a museum, when the curator comes in and the artists come in once the museum is built, all the decisions are made. So it seems to be important for your activity to be there at the very beginning with the architects.
Right.
That's exactly. Can you talk about examples? Because you've worked with many of the leading architects of our time. You've worked with Sana very intensely. You've worked with Nouvel. You've worked with Gehry. Can you tell me about some examples where for you it really worked well, this collaboration?
Taking Sana, for example, you take the Zollverein School, this concrete box in Essen, where Katsuya Seishima's intention was to do a concrete building with a monolithic concrete wall, which the German code would never allow. And then we were sitting on an old mine, and they're pumping up per hour 600 cubic meters of hot water from 1,000 meters down there and spill it with 28 to 32 degrees in the next river. So the intention, in a certain way, it was just to say, okay, we have a source, a very local source, which is very interesting. It's a real identity of this location. And we have a building which has a certain intention. So it was on a train ride back from Essen from a meeting where she asked if we can reduce the insulation to get the half-meter thick concrete wall with an inner insulation thinner, because her windows, the small windows were 50 by 50, they became holes. And I said, I can give you 2 centimeters, but it doesn't change. So finally, we had the crazy idea to say, why are we not putting plastic coils in the monolithic concrete? We use the natural resource, which is a renewable energy source, and heat the wall as it would be insulated. And that led to savings of 1.5 million in investment. So in a certain way, we took 500,000 of the savings and put it in the connection to the mine water. And it was interesting because Rem Koolhaas's museum, which is next around the corner, they didn't use it because the client said, spending 500,000 for the connection to the mining water, I can buy a gas boiler and burn the gas for the next 20 years, so I don't do it. So in our building, where we connected it to a saving, because the architect wanted to have, she always talks about paper-thin external walls, she wanted to have the thin walls. So in this connection, from the starting point, we saved money. So for the client, it was great. He saved money. And I think that's a nice point, people in the city, they liked it so much because they said this warm water is the last remaining part of our black gold, because they called the coal the black gold of the world.
So it's a memory.
Yeah, it's a memory. And so everybody felt like, okay, this building is really located here. You cannot transform it to another location because there is no mining well right below the site.